We're going to talk about money. You ready? I'm aware, so painfully aware, every time I preach about money or generosity that some churches seem to be all about it, all about the money. There are some big churches, especially some television ministries, that rake in the dough. Their ministers have Rolls Royces and private planes and multiple homes all around the world. Their wealth comes from the people who follow them on TV or attend their big churches. And the ministers tell the people that the more money they give the ministers, the more God will bless them. And the ministers take all of this success as a sign of God's approval of their ministries. You see how that works. For people who are not part of all that, for the rest of us, this is a problem. Whether we're atheists or agnostics, or whether, having read the scriptures, we've just concluded that God is surely more concerned with the poor than with giving another Rolex to a prosperity preacher, the whole thing smells like a scam. Did you hear about that baby in Texas who needed heart surgery? He was being whisked from one hospital to another where they had the capability of doing his risky surgery when somebody ratted his parents out to immigration authorities. The Border Patrol came into the hospital and followed those parents everywhere they went. They wouldn't give the mother privacy for breastfeeding or going to the bathroom. And then they arrested those parents, separating that breastfeeding mother from that sick baby for hours. Later, when ICE deports that baby and his family, what will happen to him? That's what the God of the scriptures is concerned with that baby, with his mother and his father, and with justice rolling down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Personally, I would not care to know a God that is not concerned with that. So those money-hungry preachers are a problem. When I bring up money in church, I feel like those guys have given the whole thing a bad smell. I tell you what, though, it just wouldn't be right to stay silent. Not talking about money is kind of like not talking about sex. Okay? Hear me out. It's kind of like not talking about sex because what will happen if you don't talk about it? The culture will fill the void, and other churches will fill the void. If we don't think consciously and talk about these things in our churches and in our homes, we'll still absorb all kinds of messages, and so will our children. Some of those messages are harmful. Some messages about money, like some messages about sex, teach us to be ashamed or leave us unprepared for being in right relationship with our fellow human beings. We may absorb norms that are not rooted in our values or which are even contradictory to our values. By talking about it, we can establish what the money and values teacher Nathan Dungan calls a counter rhythm. We can plant different patterns in our lives. What we believe and what we feel about money are planted right along with learning to talk and understand speech when we are very young. Can you remember your very earliest memory about money? When did you become aware of it? My grandfather tells a story about a time when I was about 3 years old and we had each other's company for the day. I don't remember what the rest of the family was up to, but my grandfather was the kind of guy who was good company for a talkative 3-year-old, and so we spent the day together. He took me to Kmart. We were passing through the aisles of Kmart when he watched me stop and toss a pair of plastic sandals into the basket. Actually, it probably looked more like this, right? These are really sensible shoes, I told him. They're very practical, and they will never go out of style. Well, what's a grandfather to do, right? He bought the shoes. I love this story. When I think of it, I can see my grandfather laughing and just throwing up his hands. I love his generous heart. Looking back now, I also see that this story reveals something, quite a lot really, about my family's culture around money. We didn't have a lot of it. Growing up, I remember us doing our important shopping at Kmart and secondhand stores, but even that was only a couple of times per year. Mostly, we spent what we had on practical and necessary things. Did I need a pair of sandals that day? Well, it depends on what you mean by need, right? Do you guys find yourselves redefining need sometimes when you're out shopping? I know of what I speak. Did I need a pair of sandals that day? I doubt it. I'm sure what I saw in those plastic patent leather shoes was beauty. And I wanted those objects of beauty with all my little 3-year-old heart. On some level, though, I also understood that it could be considered wasteful to buy something just because it's pretty. So I made a more rational argument, perhaps as much to myself as to my grandfather. Another day, at about the same age, somebody bought me an ice cream cone, and I tried to save it by putting it in my little purse. So responsible. I was determined to be responsible with luxury. I don't actually remember these stories. They've been retold to me. The earliest money story I personally remember is one I told on Easter here a few years ago. It took place on an Easter Sunday when I was about 7 or 8. I was all dressed up in a slightly bigger pair of plastic shoes from Kmart. We were on our way into First Unitarian Church in Portland, and I had a purse full of jingly coins. We passed a homeless man holding out a cup. We passed him so quickly. Church was about to start. I was trying to keep up with the group, and I didn't have a chance to stop or even really reflect on it very much in the moment. But later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him in the cold. And I cried to my mother because I wished I had given him all of my coins. I had what I needed, and I wanted to help somebody else in need. Don't take money for granted. Help others. What's your earliest memory of money? Think back to it for a moment. Were you 4 years old? 6? 10? What does your child self feel in the story? Is money associated with scarcity, with guilt, with excitement, or something that brought you joy? What do you already know about money in your earliest memory of it? Is money good, or is it bad? Money is a resource. It's one way we get the power to get things done, to meet our basic needs like shelter, food, medicine. It's one way we get power to help others and to have certain kinds of experiences. It's a resource, but it's not really ours. It just passes through our hands and through our lives. As humans with a limited number of days in our lives, we're only temporary caretakers for whatever earthly resources come our way. And in this way, money doesn't really belong to us. We just borrow it from something larger than us. Some call that largest thing God. I like that, but I understand it as shorthand, because I don't think God is somewhere counting dollars, shillings, pesos, and euros. I don't think God has the ultimate piggy bank somewhere. But money as a resource for acting and living is part of the larger creative and energetic ecosystem in which we live. Money flows, people direct it. Therefore, the way we relate to it and what we do with it is an expression of ourselves and of our values. It reflects our relationship not just with the bank or the employer, but actually with life itself, with that larger thing. The religious scholar William James wrote, "The great use of a life is to spend it for something that outlasts it." And through money, we can stretch beyond our individual selves, and we can have effects that extend out into the world that will outlast us. And this is true whether we have a little money or a lot. And it's all relative, isn't it? As spiritual people and ethical people, as people who dedicate ourselves to living lives of love and connection and honoring the sacredness of our own lives and the lives of others, we increase our impact in the world if we think of money as being for good. Earlier, I asked if money is good or bad. By itself, it's just neutral. But in our hands, in mine and in yours, it is for good. It's for your well-being and your families, for helping others, and yes, it's also for some beauty and some experiences, and it's for good, the greater good. Many people do struggle just to cover the basics. I had that experience too for many years, and in reality, it could happen to any one of us at any time because life throws surprises at us, and because we are to a certain extent subject to forces that are beyond our control, like the economy. Surprisingly often, even people who have a lot of money, relatively speaking, may feel a sense of scarcity. Have you ever known somebody who, despite having enough, always felt like they were broke? Have you been that person? I have. When that happens, it's usually a case of absorbing the messages of the larger culture, the messages that we need to have more and more stuff, that we need to keep up with other people, and messages that money isn't just valuable, but it's associated with your value as a human. These messages teach us quietly and sneakily that we don't deserve to have a sense of abundance, that we can't have that sense. They sabotage it for us. What would you say if I told you that abundance is your birthright? When I heard that idea for the first time, I was skeptical. I thought, how can you say abundance is your birthright when so many people struggle? But imagine a row of babies in a hospital nursery, like that little one in Texas. Which of those babies does not deserve abundance? Abundance and joy. We all do. And one of the surest ways to experience abundance is not to acquire more, but to share what we have. Practicing gratitude and generosity to whatever extent we are able will bring a sense of abundance into our lives. You heard a story of generosity this morning in our reading in a letter about Penny McDuffie. It wasn't a story about money, was it? It didn't mention money at all, actually, but it was such a good example of generosity and how what we do matters. Penny gave her time and her love to this place and to our children. I don't know anything about her financial contributions or her situation in that regard, but because of her and others like her, we are the congregation we are today, a thriving congregation. By sharing her gifts, she multiplied them. Here's another story about generosity. Marge Bernstein is another person who did what she was able to do and made a difference. I know some of you were friends with Marge. In fact, Marge's friends donated the flowers this morning in her honor, and I think there's a picture of her down there too. Marge had a fantastic smile. She was warm and she was caring. Maybe she even greeted you when you were a newcomer here. She had volunteered to be a stealth greeter. Meaning, basically, she took on a personal responsibility to greet newcomers in coffee hour who were holding those yellow mugs. She enjoyed making people feel welcome. Marge died unexpectedly, almost exactly 1 year ago. But before she died, she did something that turned out to have been really big. She'd already thought of what she would want her money to do in the world once she no longer needed it. And she had thought of you, of us, and of our congregation and future members that we have not yet met. She had named the church in her estate plan. That just means she'd made a plan for where her money and her assets would go when her life ended. Some people do this with a will. Others designate a portion of a life insurance policy or a retirement account to go to their congregation, and there are other ways to do it as well. When Marge did this, I'm sure she did not imagine that she would die so soon. Possibly, she imagined that when she got to the end of her life, there might not even be much money left at all. But because of her planning, when Marge did pass away and all of her affairs were settled, it turned out she'd left a bequest valued at over $133,000 to the congregation's endowment fund. That's a 25% increase in our modest but growing endowment. That endowment is invested through the denomination in socially responsible ways. Every day, it contributes to the greater good through its investments. And as the endowment earns money, some of those earnings become available to the congregation in the present for important projects and programs. Marge's gift will keep giving for many years in perpetuity. Someday, if the church falls on hard times due to those larger forces we're not in control of, like the economy, her gift and others in the endowment will help the congregation through so that it's still here on the other side, standing for love, compassion, and tolerance, honoring diversity, celebrating life's passages, and welcoming new people in. What a wonderful part of Marge's legacy in the world. I'm so thankful to her. Next week, we'll launch our annual Stewardship campaign. That's the time each year when we ask everybody to consider making a pledge. I'll bet you're probably already supporting the congregation and its mission by putting money in those offering baskets when you can, and perhaps by making other kinds of gifts. A pledge is basically a plan. It's a promise about how much money you intend to give the church in the coming year. No money is due at the time you fill out your pledge card, and if life throws you any of those unpleasant surprises, you can change your pledge during the year by just letting the church office know. We understand that things happen. Pledging is really important because it allows the church to anticipate its income, and that's how we make a budget, and we plan to do the things that we count on, like these Sunday services, and the things we dream of, like increasing our presence in the wider community, sharing our mission and our message, and working for the greater good. Without pledges, we wouldn't be able to grow our justice work or our music program or plan to raise our children up as UUs week by week because we wouldn't know whether we'll have the resources to do so. If you've been around a while, you know that stewardship campaigns can seem a little long sometimes, with lots of messages up here week after week as we encourage everyone to participate. This year, we're going to try something a little different, a condensed campaign. You're only going to hear about it up here on Sundays for a few weeks. We don't want Sundays to start feeling like they're all about the money. So we're not going to drag it out. You can help by making your pledge soon. Next Sunday, we'll have a little party after the service, and you can pick up a pledge packet. When you do, you'll be automatically entered into a drawing, a fun little drawing for a couple of prizes that support local businesses. You can grab a free ice cream sundae in the courtyard and listen to live music while you wait for that drawing to happen. And if you're ready, you can go ahead and fill out your pledge card. If you're not ready, you can take the card home and think about it. You can turn it in the next Sunday or the one after. You can mail it, you could drop it off in the office, you can make a pledge online, whatever works for you. But we do hope that if you've been part of First Unitarian for a while, and this place means something to you, that you'll take a moment to make that pledge sometime in the next few weeks. Here's the thing about pledging. I know it can take courage to do it. When our kids were very little and I was still in school, my husband and I were not able to make a very big pledge to our church. I remember feeling embarrassed and even apologizing to our minister at that time. Every year I was tempted not to make a pledge at all because I wished I could just fly under the church's radar rather than signing my name to such a modest amount. After we moved away so that I could go to divinity school, I kept renewing and paying that pledge for 5 more years as a way of retroactively increasing its value. Now that I'm a minister myself, what I know is that sometimes the most generous pledges are the ones that look the smallest. I know that the people who pledge what they can are the ones who make a church strong, and they are the ones who make sure there will be a seat at the table for whoever walks through the doors. This year, my husband and I will pledge about 10 times our old amount to this church that means so much to us now. We increase our pledge every year, and we do it joyfully because we feel so grateful to be able to after those hard years, and because it's important to us to use our money for good, and because we know it takes pledges of all sizes to make a church that welcomes all people. So next week, when you pick up your pledge card, you have permission and you have my blessing to make absolutely any amount of pledge. If $5 per month is what you're able to pledge, your contribution is valuable, appreciated, and all the more precious for the priority you made of it. If you are in the middle and perhaps can make something like the average pledge of $1,500 per year, then you are a sustainer of this place. And if you have the means to pledge many thousands, then you light a fire under the ministries of this church, and you make sure the doors are open to all. Take care of yourself and your family first. Make sure your needs are met, and only you know what those needs are. And then give until it feels good. Give until it feels good. That's where we discover a sense of abundance. When we put our resources together here in our congregation, we act on our ability to use those resources not just for needs, not just for things, but for justice, community, and love. Now that's sensible. That's practical. That will never go out of fashion. Okay? And you are beautiful. Wherever you are in life's journey, blessings to you. Thank you for the many kinds of generous gifts you share, money and otherwise. May you experience abundance and joy. I'm glad we're here together. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 69, Give